life, business, reinvention, and the lessons that outlive us. This is the Dave of the Dead podcast.
Hola, and welcome to Dave of the Dead. Today's conversation is a very special one for me because I'm joined by my longtime friend and colleague, Susie Jaramillo. Susie is an Emmy-nominated director, storyteller, artist, and entrepreneur, and the co-founder and CEO of Encantos, which is an incredible company blending technology and storytelling to build culturally rooted educational children's content, or she likes to say, beloved brands fueled by fans. Susie is also the creative force behind Canticos, the #1 bilingual brand that's helped millions of families raise confident, culturally rooted kids in 2 languages. But what I admire about Susie the most isn't just what she's built, it's why she has built it. She's actually an author and illustrator of over 30 books, a trusted voice in children's media, and someone who believes stories aren't just entertainment, they shape how we see ourselves and help form identity. With that, I would like to please welcome mi amiga, Susie Jaramillo. Welcome, Susie.
Well, thank you so much, Dave, for such a lovely introduction. It's my privilege to be here.
I love having you here. And today we're going to go deep, Susie. You know, some people know Susie, the professional, the author, the artist. I happen to be lucky enough to know Susie, the person. We're going to get into all of this. And as we like to say, life, business, reinvention, and lessons that outlive us are the pillars of today's conversation. You ready, Susie?
I'm ready. Take me there, Dave.
Let's go. So, we always start with life because, it's a great place to ground the conversation. And, we're living in an interesting time. You happen to be straddling 2 worlds, part of you is, obviously American and, you grew up part of the way here. We want to hear about that. But also you are Venezuelan. That's part of your DNA. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about the duality of growing up, which of course later will inform a lot of your business life as well. And also, how you doing? Venezuela, let's talk.
Yeah. So I identify as Venezo-gringa or Latina in the USA, as I like to say.
Yes.
Certainly my Venezuelan identity has always informed sort of my Latina-ness. It's really funny because, 20 years back, if you weren't Mexican, Puerto Rican, or Cuban, you were like other. And nobody knew, where Venezuela was on a map or, might have heard of it because of like maybe a Miss Venezuela or then later on maybe Chavez. So these are interesting times for sure, with everything that's going on and never have, it actually puts an interesting sort of onus on one to sort of like represent and sort of like speak up. Well, at the same time, I always speak for unity, right? I try to be at least the voice for unity in the Latino market in the United States because I feel like we're all seeing the same thing anyways.
Totally.
But yeah, really interesting times at the moment.
Interesting times. Tell me about mom and dad and growing up and the duality
Yeah.
of those 2 worlds.
Yeah, so mom was half American, Irish American, and half Ecuadorian, but very much 100% Staten Island. And dad is Venezuelan, 100% Venezuelan. Never even liked this country, didn't want to move here. In fact, I was born in Venezuela and then moved back to Venezuela when I was a 10-year-old child because my father did not want to move to this country. I mean, and that sort of like was pre-installed in me, sort of like how important our culture was. How important Latino-ness was, how important our music was. And it's funny because my mom being, half Irish, her family didn't really speak to each other. And then so I grew up not really knowing my American cousins. And then when I moved to Venezuela, it was like, boom, family. And your entire family lives in the same neighborhood. And we all go to grandma's on Sunday and everyone's going to show up for your birthday. So it was like just a whole different sort of like experience and, instant cousins that were all of our friends. And to this day, we have a WhatsApp chat where they just chat all day long and completely not my family from my mother's side of the family. Right. So, just and it just I fell in love with that identity of being Latina just because of the warmth, you know what I mean? The appreciation for art, music, just humor, just laugh all day long with my, Venezuelan cousins and my, my family. And so that idea of pride, culture, humor, your approach to life, joie de vivre, sazón de vida, all of that, that comes from my Latino side. So come back to the United States because my parents eventually separated. Come back to the United States and you realize, wow, I have this perception of me and my culture. And now I'm becoming aware that there's other perception of my culture that doesn't line up. And then there's this massive misrepresentation of us when it comes to media. And then it's like, oh wow, there's a role I can play here. There's something I can do about this. And so you definitely could say that my journey, absolutely, my personal life informed my professional life and where I am today, for
For
sure.
sure. For sure.
Mhm.
Remind me, brothers and sisters, right? Or maybe sisters? How many
Oh no,
siblings?
big family. I am from a long line of big families. I am one of 5. My mom was one of 7. My dad was one of 6. Big families.
Big family. Okay. And mom, you said, is half Irish, half Ecuadorian. Does she speak Spanish as well?
She spoke Spanish with a gringa accent. In fact, they called her La Gringa. Yeah.
Sure,
Now
she
now
loved that.
now I've taken that mantle on. Now when I go to Venezuela, they call me La Gringa, and which is fine. I'm used to it.
Exactly. Um, Mom and dad, were they role models? Who were your role models growing up? And were they from Latino culture, mainstream culture? Who sort of inspired you growing up?
I get asked that question a lot, and I have very weird answers because my mother was a homemaker and, she was a very traditional homemaker, very religious. And so growing up, I didn't see her as a role model because I was always very ambitious, even as a kid. Nowadays, as a 50-year-old woman, I have way more appreciation for my mother because she was absolutely fearless, like afraid of no one at no time. And she just gave our family so much unconditional love, right? And my dad was a little bit more distant, right? And my dad was always really funny and had a beautiful voice. Like my dad really sang and brought a lot of music to the family and introduced me to a lot of like llanero music, Venezuelan traditional music. So I would say, but if I were to describe role models, I would say the role models were the people I read about in books,
I was going to ask you this. So,
yeah.
so people you read about, and you're obviously an artist too. Like, give me more detail.
No,
Like,
I
who were those
so
people?
I read books. I read books about the hero's journey, right? So I identified more as those heroes in the books that I read about, and it was hard to model myself after any one particular career, but the person who spoke to me the most was Walt Disney. Not exactly
Interesting.
not exactly the typical young Latina role model, but when I was young, I never I didn't it didn't occur to me that, oh, you're a girl, you can't do that. I was like, whatever, I'll figure it out. It was like he's an artist, he writes songs, he creates these things. I love what he did. And
How
so
did you know about him? You were watching his content, but how did you know about him,
I
the
grew up in
person?
Florida. I grew up in Florida. We would go to Disney World every single time. You do realize that Venezuelans used to come to this country to go shopping,
This is
right?
true. Yes.
So
Yes.
I grew up like in the 80s and my uncles and aunts would come to go shopping and then it was always let's go to Venezuela where I would run into friends from high school who had come in to go shopping. So yeah, I spent a lot of time sort of in Disney World and where there's a lot of exhibits where you can read about the man. But then also when I decided to go to art school, I studied with kind of it was almost like a cult-like following, a specific mentor who would take us to Disney to show us how Disney used culture in the different properties that he built to give them more depth.
Wow.
And so I loved the way he made culture accessible and beautiful for everybody.
I mean, so you could clearly see with this person as your sort of North Star. I mean, it doesn't get any bigger than Walt Disney and the worlds he created and the characters and larger than life informing culture.
Yeah.
And then you mix that with your dual upbringing in the US and Venezuela and being bilingual
Yeah.
and being an artist. which I want to talk about a little bit here because people know you as a CEO, maybe not that you're an artist. I could really see how this led you to who you are today. Before we get into your business, talk about you studied art. You're a painter. I know you're an illustrator. Give a little bit of context into that.
So I'm growing up, it was always like, Susie doesn't follow instructions well. That was like literally on every report card I got. Um, and my mom always was like, "Oh, she dances to a different drummer, right?" And so I had this sort of like, "Oh, you're different," kind of pre-installed in me even when I was little, and I was dyslexic, and challenges with math and whatever, a lot of the typical sort of odd kid out things. But I could draw and I drew really well, and it gave me social cred, street cred, right? And I would use it to never be bored because I didn't have a TV growing up, but I did have a big room where I could just draw and make things in a sewing room. So I grew up making things, and when it came to choices for college, I just intuitively knew you're going to go humanities, you're going to go art. And what I didn't know was whether I could be good enough to have a professional career in art. That I didn't know.
Hmm.
And I've always had like an allergy to being mediocre in the world. You know what I mean? So I was a little afraid that what if I studied art and I wasn't very good? And in fact, one of my in my early interviews at Pratt, I had this counselor who, in retrospect, I have a word for him. But at the time, he was like, "Yeah, you're not very good, but okay, we'll let you in." Literally, that's what he said to me. And I remember thinking, note to self, I may not be very good now, but I will be incredibly good by the time I leave, and I'm going to work my tail off on this. And I did work my tail off. I would draw for 8 hours, and then I would do drawing group and draw for 3 hours more. So we were drawing 12 hours a day. Did I do that math? 11 hours a day. Sorry, bad math. So I worked my tail off, and by the time I left, I was recommended actually to the recruiting teams from different studios as like best draftsman of my year, right? So being good at the craft was incredibly, incredibly important to me. But at the same time, I realized, and my mentor used to tell me all the time, Susie, talent, that and a nickel won't get you on the subway. And at the time, didn't realize what he meant. What does he mean? That and a nickel won't get you on the subway. Talent, you know?
Hmm.
And now I absolutely know what that means, right? Because
Yeah.
talent without purpose goes nowhere, right? But talent with purpose and insight can take you pretty far, right? And especially if you have, people skills and management skills, and you know how to like build teams and understand business and all the other stuff. And you know how to recognize talent in other people. Super, super, super important. And then you can scale what talent you have, right? So that's how, I fell in love I went to art school and sought the creative profession, even though I didn't know what the creative profession was. Because back then, when you're aware of, oh, somebody's illustrating books, so there's book illustration, and then at the time there existed this thing called advertising illustration, and that's it. You had no idea that there was this whole field called creative production. So,
Right.
you had no idea, like the world of pre-production, the world of theater, the world of experiential. There's just so many, like, the world of marketing. You were clueless, right? And so yeah, you figured it out as you went along. And the good thing about developing that muscle to figure it out as it goes along is that I do think that muscle has best prepared me for this era, right? Where we're going into AI, and where it's not enough to be a painter, and it's not enough to just do this one thing, or, where you really have to, and to be an entrepreneur, I think it really was an excellent muscle to build, that
Yeah.
muscle where you're constantly learning, you're constantly putting pieces together.
All right. So before we get into all that and the Susie that we
Mhm.
know today, you graduate Pratt. When I
Mhm.
met you, I don't know, we were in our probably mid to late 20s, dare I say,
Yes.
something like that, early
Yeah.
20s. We were
Mhm.
babies, as they say.
Yeah.
And you were like the chief creative officer of an agency at the time called Ruido Group, which
That's
was
right.
dope. It was really the only agency I knew of
Youth
Talk a little bit
agency.
about that. And is that when you're like, oh, I could apply art to business? Like, was that the aha moment? You might have done something before that, but I didn't know you that.
That is exactly the aha moment. I was at the time I was hanging out with a bunch of ex Star Media. They were Star Media execs. You remember Star Media back in the
Oh, I
day?
remember Star Media. Do our listeners remember? Describe what Star Media is so they know what that
Yeah,
is.
Star Media. I think it was like, can think of it as AOL for the Latin market.
There you go.
And they were a pretty powerful startup. They raised a ton of money. And I don't remember how far, whether I don't think they went public, but they got pretty far. And my sister worked there, so I was hanging out with a lot of Star Media execs. And a few of them went off and they were gonna do a startup. And it was funny. And I just was hanging out with them and they would talk about creative and they I would joke with them and I would give them a lot of ideas and they were like, you should come and join us and be our creative director. And I was like, sure. And I had never been a creative director before. I had no experience in advertising.
Interesting.
None.
So you literally just morphed into this.
I just
Okay.
morphed into it. But but they needed it, and I don't think that they knew. They weren't really thinking what kind of pedigree this person should have. Which nowadays you would. You'd be like, okay, but what other agencies have you worked for? Like, and what
Right.
kind of awards are you bringing to the table? Back then, it was sort of like, ah, you're making really smart points. Why don't you just join us?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Did
know?
they look at your portfolio, Susie? Did they look at the pictures you drew? No, it didn't matter.
It didn't matter. They kind of knew my work because, one of them was dating my sister and blah, blah, blah. So they kind of knew my work.
Aha. Okay.
And my work was not agency like at all. It was like traditional artist stuff, like
Which
drawings
is a
and
good
painting.
thing. Because
Yeah.
Ruido Group was not a traditional agency. Talk about what that was real quick.
Yeah, so the Reader Group was all about sort of like youth marketing. It's like cool stuff for young people because it's just at the time, Hispanic advertising was very sort of like traditionally like Spanish dominant, Univision, family. That's kind of what it was, and it wasn't speaking to young Latinos who were growing up here speaking English, right?
Right.
And it didn't take into consideration, urban Latinos, tattoo culture, any of that, and any of the sort of like cool stuff that was driving what is the U.S. Hispanic market today. And we would
Yeah.
go in and we would educate people. Hey, what does Miami look like versus what's Tex-Mex versus what's Chicano? And that was a big part of what we did. We educated on what was trend in the Latino market and how it related to their brand and what they could do in the youth space. And honestly, Dave, doing so many of those like presentations, like it did make me an expert. There are very few people who know more about the Hispanic market than I do. I do know a lot. And because I love it. I love culture. I absolutely love culture. And I love the fabric of the Latino market here in the United States because it's its own unique Latino-ness that's
Sure
made up
is.
from these
Yeah.
fibers of all these different communities. It's such a beautiful market.
And then here we are getting into the nuances of the market, right? You were not doing mainstream en Espanol. That's not what Ruido Group
Yeah.
was. Truth be told,
Yeah.
I met Susie because I, at the time, had one of the first bilingual, bicultural.coms called icaramba.com, like letter I caramba.
Great name.
Get it?
Great name.
So imagine our worlds collided
Yeah.
through that prism. And
Yeah.
yeah, here we are all these years later. And
Yeah.
then I know Ruido evolved and became a different agency, and that agency was sold, etc. And then, you were obviously at a reinvention, an inflection point in your life. Talk about the jump from being an agency person to being an entrepreneur.
So, as an agency person, Ruido grew up, right? And it became like a big general Latino agency. And we even had a couple of small general market clients, right? And we, had a couple clients in retail. And I saw like the numbers kept on coming out, like, the Latino opportunity, how we over index in telecommunication, how we're over indexing in retail, how we're over indexing in personal care, how much we over index in our spend. And the solve for the client was oftentimes what celebrity can we get, right? Plug and play. Can we do this that we're doing in the general market? Can we just do it in English? And even when you did have like big fancy breakthrough ideas, it was clients were very adverse to take risks when you were the Latin agency. And at the same time, I mean, this was, 2010, 11, 12, like the social media platforms were starting to come out, right?
Yep.
And it was like, oh my God, you can own your own audience. You can build something and develop a following relatively quickly in the social media platforms and own it. And this is the time of branded content, right?
Yep.
And we had this one client and we were just dancing around this idea of branded content. content constantly, but they never pulled the trigger on anything. And
Uh-huh.
that's when I realized, my God, they are not in the business of building brands from scratch. They are not going to take a risk. I should take a risk, build it, own it, and then they can come buy it, because that's what they like to do. They like to buy things that are already built. They don't like to build from scratch, right? And at the time I was having babies, and I, looked especially in the kids wear and in sort of like Latino kids media space.
Uh-huh.
And all there was Dora. That's it, Dora. And I was like, wow, I did some research, and I think the number at the time I came up with was Dora is like a $20 billion brand. And I was like, what? Dora is a $20 billion brand, right? And at the time, Dora was like 20 years old. So I was like, okay, it's time for something new. It's time for something new. Nobody's ever done anything with Latino nursery rhymes. And there's so much other space for other IP to be created with a Latin heart, but I could start with this low-hanging fruit that's just a public service. Like,
Uh-huh.
seriously. The fact
Uh-huh.
that it hasn't been done yet blew my mind. And so how to go to market, because the question is, at the time we were like, how do you go to market in 2017 or 2016 when it was, and I thought social media first, but then so here's where I meet Herb, right? Herb Scannell, who was
Yes.
lovely,
Say,
mentored
tell
me.
who Herb, say who Herb Scannell is. Yeah, who is
So
he?
Herb, Herb was it the CEO of Nickelodeon or the president of Nickelodeon, something
I
like
think he's
that?
the president of Nickelodeon. I know Herb too, full disclosure.
Yeah.
Susie and I both know Herb. Shout out to
President.
Herb if you're listening.
That's Herb. Herb was wonderful, beyond wonderful for us. And actually, I don't know. So Voto Latino was born in my office. In fact, It's Your Country Represent was my
Right.
tagline that I wrote for them. And at the time, Herb gave free media, free Viacom media to run all the Voto Latino ads. Right. And we were writing scripts for celebrities like on the dime as John Leguizamo confirmed, but he doesn't want a script. He wants to improvise. But Cameron Diaz confirmed and she has ideas. It was that type of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Anyways, so he hosted kind of like a salon in his house, and he invited folks like Tim Shea and the creator from Backyardigans and a bunch of other like really senior people that are all in the children's media world. And it was interesting to kind of get their POV. And by the way, I was so nervous. This was like my presentation to the entertainment world. And what I realized really quickly was that, nobody really understood what this market was and they didn't get the Latino nursery things at all. It just, nobody understood. I realized, like, it's like subject matter expertise. You realize, oh wait, you get it better than they do.
Yeah.
Right? So Herb got it and he was 100% behind it. But I could see that not everyone really understood that sometimes what people really want is their childhood that they can share with their kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
They see themselves reflected. They want to see, like, it was something that was that didn't quite connect with traditional children's media execs. And so I turned around and started talking to my own colleagues from like my workspace, and one of them was Stephen Wolf Pereira. And I had reached out to him, and I had already had, I had an offer from a major publishing house to publish the book. So that was done. I had an agent, that was done, but it was all moving way too slow. And I wanted to, and I put an app that I built with my husband into the market already.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was doing incredibly well. It was free. It was just a thing to test. And it had something like, 200,000 downloads. And
Which is
so,
incredible. How did you
yeah,
get 200,000 downloads? Just
because it was the
by
only Los
organic.
Pollitos. It was the only Los Pollitos app in the market, and it was free. So, and I put it on YouTube, just the gameplay from the app, and it was incredibly how that blew up, right? Just the game, just the video from the app. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of potential here. And at the time there were other players in the market, and they're still there, and they're more sophisticated now. But no one was thinking brand. No one was thinking, how do I really connect with mom and build something that she's going to want to show off, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's the secret sauce. Connect with mom, make something that people want to badge themselves with, make a
Mm-hmm.
brand that really speaks to something deep, a deep love, a deep yearning, right? And so I got on the phone with Steven more because I wanted data from him to help build my case for my agent. And Steven was like, what are you doing? You have to do that with me. And it was like, our first call was like 3 hours long. And so the next is kind of history because he had muscles I didn't have in terms of tech and raising money and how you frame things from a business narrative. And so even though intuitively I was thinking more franchise planning, Stephen brought a layer of product management and tech understanding and data that my brain hadn't quite thought that, well, didn't have experience with.
Right.
And so it was like if advertising was going to school to understand business opportunity and brand building and team building and creative direction, Encantos and working with Stephen became my school on how tech becomes the infrastructure and the it's almost like the distribution factor in
Sure.
how brands get built today.
Yeah. Where art meets science, where content meets commerce, that
Yep,
intersection. So you had
exactly.
some pivotal moments. Let's just go back a half step. So Herb Scannell, by the way, full disclosure, is half Puerto Rican. He's half Irish, half Puerto Rican. So like Susie, he has some Irish and some, yeah, he's mixed.
Which
So
is
that was
why he
kind of a pivotal moment. And you were in, as they say, the room where it happens, the person
uh
largely responsible for Dora the Explorer. You're in there with him. He happens to be half Latino. You're thinking anything's possible. You start going down this path. Then you meet someone else pivotal, or you knew him, but he became your business partner, which we'll talk about the origin in Steven,
yeah.
who's a force of nature, as we know. Did I miss something? What else?
No, and actually before this, I had decided to sell the agency. I was like, let's sell this. I'm done. I'm bored. And I do think for anyone, if you're bored in your job, leave. You don't waste your time. Life is too
There's
short.
there's a lesson. Okay. Yes, we've heard that. By the way, I think
Yeah,
you're my fourth episode. This has been a theme throughout every episode.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was bored. It was done. I could see, and so once we sold the agency, I could see that I was a ghost. You ever know that moment when if it's never happened to you, I don't know. So
Explain
and
this. What
actually,
does that mean?
well, and you've sold a few companies, so you probably might
I
have felt this
have.
feeling where you're there, but you're like, I'm a ghost. I'm a ghost here at this
Does
place right
that mean
now.
like your identity was wrapped up in the agency, and when the agency was gone, you didn't know who you were? Or am I misunderstanding what
Not
you mean?
that. It's not that. It's like you're in the physical space still. Like I'm
Yeah.
in the agency, but I'm like, I think people can see through me. I'm a ghost.
Got it.
It's just like
Got it.
you preemptively know that you don't belong here anymore and that you need
Got
to
it.
forge your new future. And for me, it was hard because it's like I knew I had to do this alone without my previous partners. And
Yep.
I do remember with the agency, I had other partners and I love them both. And we're still friends to this day. One went off to be a filmmaker. The other is running one of the big agencies in the Latin market here today.
Roberto. Let's shout out Roberto.
Roberto. Shout out Roberto. Roberto's running Cien, right? For Lily and Enrique.
Yes.
So I didn't I knew we were destined to go different directions. And I knew that this was going to be a path that I had to carve out on my own. And there was risk there too, because, I'm the creative person and I'm going to figure this out. And it was sort of like, again, the same jumping point where you just jump and see if you can fly or not. Like when I went to art school and it was like, I don't know if I'm good or not, but I'm going to try, I'm going to do this and be as good as I can be. Same thing happened when I decided to do Encantos as a solo entrepreneur before I met Steven, right? I'm going to try to do
Right.
this creative studio business thing. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but I'm going to try to do it. And, lucky for me, I found someone who completely was just as crazy as I was and
Yeah.
who understood the vision and had a complementary set of skills.
Susie, it sounds like you didn't have much hesitation, though. You just knew in your bones this was what I'm doing next. You didn't really pause too much to reflect. It sounds like you were
No,
ready
I
to do
took
this.
I took 2 years off well, remember, I was having babies at the time. I don't think I mentioned that. I was having babies. I was
Yep.
happily married, right? I was happily married, still am, to someone who was earning plenty. And I had just sold my company. So there was some, financial security. And so I didn't start and I wouldn't have started from a place of like, oh, I need to pay the rent. No, it was a place of like,
Right.
I need a break. I just did this. I have small babies. I'm going to stay home and keep the nanny who I love to this day and, make it work for her and make it work for me and draw and paint. And I'm going to take 2 years to breathe and allow myself, like, what's the next step?
Really?
And
So could you have done it had you not taken this 2 year, it's not quite a sabbatical, you're a mom, you're busy, but had you not taken that pause, would it have been as clear what to do? You couldn't have just jumped into this, in other words.
I don't think it's wise to just jump without pausing to reflect. Um, and by the way, in that time off, I translated 20 nursery rhymes. I illustrated and put together 3 books. I came up with our, sort of iconic reversible format that our books have. I built an app and put it into the market. And I painted a lot, and just for myself, other properties, other ideas, right?
Right.
Um, and so I think that it showed me, like, how I thought. It was a moment to get to know myself, and to really, I researched, Dave. I would spend time researching, okay, who are the mommy bloggers? And then I would make lists.
Mhm. Yeah.
I just, I would say who are the Facebook. I would, like, literally, like, how does social media move? So I kind of studied that too. And I also apps. I collected apps. Toca Boca, Duck Duck Moose, Tiny Bop, you know what I mean? Like, collected who the apps were that I liked, who made them, right? And so I was just getting to know that, like, world, that I wanted to connect the pieces. Like, I didn't understand, still don't really, why the app world is so disconnected from the children's media world. To me, it should just be all one world. Like,
Wow. So you were hardly sitting there idly. You were working out. I'll use a gym reference. You were literally building muscles. You had them there, but this is all the foundation for the business ultimately that you launched. And you were just, working your way through it. You didn't call it a business, but then it became obvious. Oh, this is what I want
That's
to do.
how I relax, actually. I actually, it's like that. I actually enjoy doing that. I really enjoy sort of studying and putting pieces together, and, like, it's like, why is the publishing world over here and the children's media world over here and the app world over here? You know what I mean? And why aren't people not, especially in this day and age, not thinking more cohesive? And even still, like, if you think about the way media works, and this is being disrupted. This is the beauty of this moment, actually. It's like, the book gets made, it sells 2 million copies. Then someone decides to make a series or make a movie. That takes a certain amount of time. Then that gets licensed over here to Random House. And,
Yeah.
that will do the series or with the book series, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, the person who, wrote the book, or the person who had the idea, is really excluded from most of those other different processes, right?
Yep.
Um, and if you're, in the children's media world and you wrote a show or something, odds are really you probably have, nothing to do with the IP these days, right?
Yeah.
Nor did you probably benefit from, what that IP became, other than maybe you had a full-time job for a while, right? And so, or maybe not. Maybe you were lucky. Maybe the SpongeBob creator reaped some benefits. I don't know. Like, I don't know what everyone's different deal is, but
Right.
I felt in my bones that I wanted to own the IP, or benefit. It wasn't about owning the IP. It was about benefiting on the back end from the IP that I created,
Yeah.
even if I knew that I would have to find funding.
We'll get into that in a minute because that's a whole other part of this journey you've been on, and one that I know Steven was very actively involved in too.
Yeah.
But creatively first. So if people don't know Encantos, that's the company.
Hmm.
My understanding, there's 2 main brands, right? Canticos and Skeletina, and I want to talk about Skeletina because it has the Dia de los Muertos,
Of course.
connection and
Right.
all that. But talk about those 2 pillars, and I want to understand the backstory behind them.
So 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 Encantos is the overall umbrella, and actually there's
Right.
there's 4 properties, but they're in different levels of development. So, Canticos was the first one,
Right.
and it's a very simple. It's a nursery rhyme brand designed to help parents share their culture and their language with their kids. It's that simple, right?
Yep.
And I think Latino nursery rhymes. The second one was actually Tiny Travelers, and that was Steven's brainchild, and it was a series of books designed to introduce kids to the cultures and countries of the world. And we did a series of 12 books that are in market today.
Got it.
Third one, Skeletina, that came from me because as a kid, I was always, I had terrible nightmares. And I think there's a lot of kids out there that have nightmares. And at the time, there were no, like, movies or properties that really talk about nightmares. And, you have Nightmare Before Christmas. That has nothing to do with nightmares. And then
Right.
you have, whatchamacallit? What's the other Disney movie? Recuérdame, the Day of the Dead movie that Disney put out.
Wasn't
And
it called Encanto?
no, that's the other one. That's that's
I'm
the other
sorry,
one.
Disney.
It's the, yeah, no.
We'll
It's
think of
the
it.
Yeah, it's the Recuérdame, na 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 na, whatever, I'm spacing the name of the movie.
Sure.
And that didn't have anything to do with nightmares either. And so, we put it out. It's called Skeletina in the in-between world. And the idea is there's this little girl that lives, in the in-between world that helps kids, turn their nightmares into fun dreams. And it's really about helping solve for, fear, because I feel like basically it's anxiety that leads to fear that leads to nightmares. That's the source of nightmares. And I feel like if you can help children become more fearless in their dreams, maybe they'll be more fearless in their daily lives, which that certainly was my experience. And isn't it great for the world to help, raise kids that are more fearless? I feel like almost every bad decision in life comes from fear. And
Yeah.
so the more we can, ease people's fears and the fears of children, the healthier a world we can have.
Yeah.
And
100%.
right? And last but not least, we have a brand called This Is Cooler. This Is Cooler was developed with the Aspen Institute to help kids find, cooler ways to address climate anxiety and climate change, right? And to
Yeah.
sort of like it was the idea was to make climate change conversations cool. Uh,
Hmm.
and so with that, we made a pilot. We put it on YouTube. It got 5 million views. It's still in development. Nowadays, climate change, not a very popular um,
Yeah.
topic. So we will love to see where that goes. But again, all of these properties are designed to have a lot of legs that go in a lot of directions.
Got it. Okay. And so how long has Encantos been a bit in business? About 10 years we going on?
Oh my gosh, in April, it's going to be our 10th anniversary.
Right. Okay. So what have been some of the challenges in building this business? And talk about also, it was you and Steven against the world, but now you have a lot of people who bet on this business. You've raised capital. Not everyone can do that. That's very difficult to do. Talk about that part of the journey.
So honestly, that was Steven's one superpower, that understanding of how venture works, how venture thinks. And it was incredible because it allowed us to make a lot of things that we could go to market with just in time. Like just in time, because now the landscape is so cluttered and AI is omnipresent and everything is getting it's so much harder to stand out, and the demands on making things are so much more intense, just because once you start producing, it's this hamster wheel where you just, in order to break through in the algorithm, you have to produce so much. So we raised money and have a lot of backing that has helped us invest in our brands and our tech that gives us an edge, right? So Canticos it already is like a mini franchise. It has a robust, beautiful learning app that's been featured by the App Store several times. And in fact, they flew us to, LA to do a photo shoot and feature us. And it has a world of like free resources that are on our website. You've got, 80 episodes of content. There's actually 6 hours of content now on our YouTube channel. We have, Canticos alone has about 24 books at least, right? And in addition, we've got, our Tiny Travelers also collection of books, but and on just the database and the way we go to market and the engine, if you will, that allowed us to build. And it's true. You have a lot of people that can help you if you want to meet someone. If you're looking for a contact here, you have a wonderful, collection of advisors that can help you, and you do have a lot of people betting on you winning, and also a lot of people that you don't want to disappoint, right? And I, for one, don't make it a habit of disappointing. So I'm really set on like really building this thing out to what I know it has the potential to be. And in my head, it's already there. It's just a matter of like, how long?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So if someone's you, if there's a young, doesn't have to be Latina, but I'll say a female entrepreneur just getting started, has an idea, has a dream. You obviously, just to recap, you put yourself in a position where you were in rooms where you're with people of influence. You brought on a partner who complemented what you're doing, who you are as a person and a business person. You
Mhm.
raised capital to bring the dream to life. It would have been hard without the capital. Like, there's lessons in that. Am I recapping it, or what would be your advice to like the young Susie or someone like you who's listening going, wow, I don't know if I could do that?
So I would say, first of all, make sure that you're solving a problem that really needs solving, and that you have a fire in your gut that's really um, propelling you to do this, because it is hard. And if you don't have sort of your passion, your purpose, and sort of like your prosperity, those three things
There you go.
aligned,
The three P's.
the three P's, you won't have the fire to see it through, right? Because it does get hard. And there are so many unknown unknowns. And you're constantly pivoting and problem solving. God, there's so many P's.
I think there's five P's, everybody, for those who are keeping track. The
The funny
pivoting
thing
and problem solving
is,
now.
I've actually looked into like, what is the semantic power behind the so
Of
many.
course you did, Susie. What did you discover?
Nobody's researched that. There's so little. There's so little.
It's important
Um,
work.
It's the C words and the P words.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Make sure that, and then make sure that somebody isn't doing it already well. You know what I mean? Because if somebody's already out there doing it really well, then you have to question. Then what are you doing differently? What are you doing differently better?
Right.
Um, and don't be afraid to like. If you enjoy the work. Enjoy the work. If you don't enjoy the work, don't do it. Don't don't be an entrepreneur just because you're chasing the dollar. I think that's such the wrong reason to be an entrepreneur. Um, do an entrepreneur because you love the work and you love the problem solving and you're so fulfilled by the problem that you're solving.
Yes.
Um, right? And you really feel that you're going to build something that's making the world a better place, right? I always wanted to put content into the world and art into the world that would build bridges of understanding.
Hmm.
And I do feel that an artist truly serves their purpose when they use their art to serve humanity, right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of artist I am. And I think lots of different artists will have different POVs on that. But that's how I feel about it. Whether you are showing paintings in a gallery, whether you're Ai Weiwei or, you're, I don't know, Julie Taymor or anyone else, like hopefully your art is serving a purpose. And I think children's media is an absolute art form. um, Not that I wouldn't want to do others at any point, but I think that children's media is so important because you're nurturing future adults. you're you're nurturing the people that are going to take care of you when you're, in your 90s, in your 80s. How do you
Yeah.
want them to behave? How do you want them to think? So, for me, children's media is such a worthy, worthy, worthy cause.
Yeah, you're such a beautiful way of looking at the world and what you do, and yeah, you're building so much value from your heart, right? You're not chasing the dollar. This comes from
Mm-mm.
a very deep place inside you, as now our listeners are learning to, yeah, get to know you. And frankly, my favorite part of watching, you on LinkedIn, as people do, is when you go into local communities and it's you and it's a puppeteer and it's all these mom and kids. Can you just quickly talk about that?
Oh
Because
my God,
that's not
Dave.
necessarily part of the CEO job, but I know you love it and it's central to the heart of the company. I think it's so important that you touch the community the way that you do, physically like that.
Dave, last week I did an event like that with a group of homeless children.
Wow.
With
Where was
Yeah,
that?
it's in the Bronx in a space called Storyland.
Mhm.
And I'm forgetting the name of the organization that brought the kids there. And I haven't done a LinkedIn post on this yet. And I'm a little torn with how my perception could be precisely because I'm a CEO and people expect CEOs to be doing board presentations all the time and that type of
No, that's boring.
businessy
You can't only do
thing.
that. Yeah.
And And here I am going into libraries and into, story centers and shelters and shit. But it was really special. Storyland had bought a whole bunch of our plush toys, and they had found a sponsor to buy the plush toys and to buy books. And we had donated books to them. And they wanted me to come in and do a story time. And I always see this as a moment to, well, I get to witness how our brand connects with kids, which is
Mhm.
an ultimate privilege. It's a total privilege. I get to do things in a completely fearless way because I'm not worried about critics.
Right.
I'm just there to bring a puppet and connect with the children and see how the songs do and bring them some joy, hopefully, right? And it was incredibly special. We had this one little girl who I was watching before we came on to do Canticos, and she literally would not speak or move the whole time. And when I came on with I brought 3 chickies, so it wasn't just me with a puppet. I had 2 helpers that also had big puppets to help me
Mhm.
out, and we brought the 3 puppets to life. She melted. She completely changed. It was her, and then we found out later it was her first day in the shelter. She was from Mexico. She was mostly Spanish dominant, but she did speak a little bit of English. And
Mhm.
when we started singing Los Pollitos, when we started singing the songs, all of a sudden she felt like she belonged. And I think that's a special part of the brand, making children feel like they belong, making, families, maybe families feel like they belong, just connecting with children. It was very, very special.
That is really special, and I love that you do it. Don't ever stop doing that. You could do both. You could be in the boardroom, you could be the queen of the boardroom and doing what you're doing. It's important. Yeah, and it keeps you close to why you're doing it, the
It does.
joy of it, and that's everything right there. That's the heart of everything you're doing,
Yeah, I get
and
a
I love it. I love seeing you doing it, Susie, because I know you love it. So we've talked about reinvention, Susie, the person throughout your career. We could sort of connect these 2 ideas because you did mention AI, right?
Mhm,
And it's been 10 years since you launched the company.
mhm.
And how, if at all, are you looking to pivot the company in the world of AI? And what are your aspirations for the future? Because this is not the same world it was 10 years ago, maybe even 10 months ago at this point. Talk about that.
So it's interesting you asked the question. I don't see AI as a point of pivot. I see AI as turbocharging what we're doing. And so I have a thesis, Dave, and let's see how
Tell
this
me,
thesis
what is it?
plays out. So most folks, AI on the creative end of AI, a lot of folks who a lot of folks use it who don't
Uh-huh.
know how to create traditionally. And that's great. I more power to them, and it's going to
Uh-huh.
open waters out to a whole bunch of content that after a while is going to kind of start to look alike, right? Because it's a lot of people, pulling from the same sources. And I
Yep.
almost say I equate it with a color palette. If you had a color palette and you just are keep continuously mixing all the colors, what you end up is a lot of gray, you
Uh-huh.
know? And so I believe that people are still going to be drawn to specific brands that they love that
Uh-huh.
has a very signature identity that is only like authenticity. I think that authenticity is actually going to increase in value, and that
Uh-huh.
I think that specific brands that have specific authenticity are actually going to increase in value because when you have so much content production, you're drawn to something that feels more unique and more authentic, especially when a lot of it's
Sure.
going to start to get. So I feel like we were
Yep.
lucky enough to break through with Canticos just in time. I feel like Skeletina has an incredibly diverse look and feel. Sorry, not diverse, a unique look and feel, and actually, the background world of Skeletina lends itself beautifully to AI. The world of creepy, interesting nightmares and dreams.
Sure does. Yep.
I, and we've already created a dream machine with her where you can send in your dreams and your nightmares and she'll turn them into fun dreams. So I actually feel like Skeletina might be the first creative property where we use traditional methods to create the infrastructure of the world, but then there are areas where we use some AI creative too. And This Is Cooler is going to be defined by its authenticity. Like This Is Cooler this is very live action. It's very real kids talking in real places, but maybe we could use AI to create sort of fun imaginary scenarios, right? That make that up the comedy. So I feel that AI kind of brings us to a world where, the capacity for creation gets turbocharged.
Mhm.
Whether it in the film that you make or the creative that you're making, whether it's what you're writing, whether it's how you're marketing, how you're going to market. And so it's less of a pivot, and it's more like, oh wow, now I can do so much more with so many fewer people, like or the same amount of people. Like our team, we're staying the same, if not we're growing.
You are.
But our small team, we're growing, but we're growing more thoughtfully. And everyone today is probably doing the work of what 3 people would have owned, 10 years ago.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Mhm.
So as we wrap up here, I have 2 things I want to cover off. One is I'll just sort of put you on the spot, what is what do you want to be remembered for? What is Susie, the person and entrepreneur, you know, what would be on, I don't want to be morose, but we are going to go down the funeral path in a minute.
Oh my
This is
god,
Dave of the Dead after all. Like,
I think about what I want onto my tombstone all the time. Are you kidding me? So I'm
what
an
is it?
orphan. My both of my parents are gone.
Okay.
Um, it's a little cliche, maybe a little too simple. It's like Susie used art to make the world a better place. Is that so like
It's so
cliche?
simple and so perfect. Yes, you did.
You
It
know,
fits
I mean,
perfectly on the tombstone, by the way.
yeah. Well, I mean, I was gonna say if I died tomorrow and it put Susie made Canticos, I think I'd be okay. I mean, Canticos just affects so many people in so many wonderful ways that I'm okay with
Yeah.
that as a sport. But if, by the grace of God, I live a few more years, I really hope that I get remembered by someone who made, creative, who made creative things that made
Yeah.
better humans, made the world a better place.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And as I promised you, I asked a previous guest this question, just sort of came up organically. I'll tell
Mhm.
you what her answer was in a minute. I'm sure you've seen the episode by now. But at your funeral one day, I have my song picked out. What song would you want to be played and why?
So I ever since I've thought about that a lot, believe it or not, and and the thing is, like, now I've realized a lot of people say this song, but obviously, I did it my way.
That's exactly the song that my previous guest, Maribel Lara, said. And yeah,
I I just really feel like a lot of people are saying this song, and I found out later that Donald Trump also wants that to be his song, so we have
oh,
that in
okay.
common.
Interesting.
So I think it goes to show that a lot of us just feel that, we're breaking a lot of rules, and we believe in trusting ourselves, and we're going against the grain, and we're doing stuff that everybody around us told us we were crazy to do and that we couldn't do. And I do feel that, being confident enough to do things your way and to lean into your listening to the voices inside your head that counsel you is the right way to live. And so yeah, that's kind of my song for my
I love
funeral.
it. And most importantly, there's a Spanish version sung by the
I
Gypsy
was gonna
Kings
say,
called A
I
Mi
was gonna
Manera. So maybe we'll play that as well.
absolutely,
It's like how
absolutely.
we always sing in Spanish, at birthdays, right?
I mean,
We do English and Spanish. You always got to do both.
yeah, for sure.
I love it. Well, that's a good place to end, my friend Susie Jaramillo, CEO and co-founder of Encantos. It's been such a pleasure having you on Dave of the Dead. Continued success to you. Keep doing what you're doing. It's important, beautiful work. And I love you. The industry loves you. And, I think our viewers, our listeners, or both, are going to get a lot from this conversation. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you for doing this and for having this beautiful podcast. It's been a
I,
treat.
I love it. Okay. Hasta la próxima.
Ciao.
Life, business, reinvention, and the lessons that outlive us. This is the Dave of the Dead podcast.